Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order for the Walker Planning Commission, April 19. First item on the agenda, we'll review the meeting minutes from April 5. Any corrections for that? Have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion by Scott, supported by Pat, to approve the minutes for the April 5 meeting. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. This is an opportunity for general public comment. You've got 3 items on the agenda. If you have some comments concerning those projects, there'll be time for taking public comment. But if you have something of more general nature you want to bring to light, you have an opportunity to come up to the podium and give your name and share with us your thoughts. No takers on that. We'll move into the first item on the agenda. Case number 23-005 is a site plan review for an office building at 3733 3 Mile Road. And we look to Paula Preby, the planning director, to introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just pull up the plans here for everybody. I apologize, we've only got one screen. IT's aware that we're down some of our regular viewpoints around the room. And here's where we are in the city. So this is at the corner of 3 Mile and Fruitridge, just south of the highway. And there is an existing building, triangle construction here, and there's a second lot to the rear, and there is several easements between these 2 properties and this one here, including the driveway access that provides access to the site in the rear. So the proposal on the plans here is to add a second building. It's a kind of designed as a 4-tenant office type building, and they would increase the parking capacity for that, divide the lots a little bit differently than they are now to accommodate the building and the parking. So relatively straightforward project from the staff perspective. At the site plan review committee meeting, most of the concerns were addressed. I don't have too much more to offer in terms of critique or comments. The use is allowed in the zoning district, which is ML, light industrial. The sign is off premises, so the property is kind of this wonky shape in the back here. The sign for the new building would be down here along 3 Mile. There is an existing easement, as I mentioned earlier, for stormwater, driveway access, and the sign that was part of an earlier project and was tied to that property being split about 20 years ago. And that was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals to have that drive. They don't have frontage on 3 Mile. The frontage is on Fruitridge. It's right next to the highway entrance. So we end up with a unique case here. So that off-premises sign is allowed. We are down one city engineer tonight, unfortunately, so I will once again be doing my best to mention any of his comments. He sends his apologies. So the comments from the city engineer: 3 Mile Road will need to be open cut to install the new sanitary lateral. We'll need dimensions of the open cut, cross sections, because of how they're cutting into the pipe. There's some specifics there, and that can be handled at a staff level. Additionally, there's a parking lot light in the path of the sanitary lateral that will need to be relocated. And again, that's a relatively minor fix that staff can handle if the project moves forward. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have or provide any other views on the screen.
Commissioners, any questions, comments? There being none, will the applicant come forward, a representative, and introduce yourself? There's on the podium, there will be a button to activate the speaker.
Hello, my name is Adam Feenstra with Feenstra & Associates, the design engineer. Yeah, we are looking forward to building this small office building. Staff was great to work with on this project. Very helpful in getting the utilities back to the site. It's a little tricky without the frontage on the main road there, but I think everyone was pretty happy with the results. Yeah. We are in the process of submitting the lot line adjustment to kind of accommodate the building. As you can see, we're adding an extra fire hydrant along Fruitridge, which will provide better access for both the existing building and for the proposed building. The parking is designed to be completely independent of each use, so each building has appropriate number of spots on their lot. So there's no need for cross parking easements or agreements, things like that. Stormwater detention was improved last year when the Pacific Pride gas station went in next door, and was designed to accommodate the full build out of this parcel that we've got here. So even that's all taken care of. So it's a nice, compact, easy project that I think will be a great addition to the area.
Any questions? In terms of the city engineer's report, any issues with that?
No, I actually believe Scott had missed that some of those notes might have been on a different sheet. So we'll go over that with him and just probably add them to the site plan sheet as well, just for clarity. But yeah, very, very easy to address comments, and no problem getting those taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is not a public hearing, but if there's someone out in the audience that has a question about this or comment, this is an opportunity to do so. Okay. Commissioners, I think as Paul had described, it looks like a pretty straightforward project. Good fill in for an unusually shaped lot and put to good use.
Mr. Chair, I wish every case was this easy. Case number 23-005, Triangle Equities Office Building Site Plan Review. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the site plan for the new 56 square foot office building and associated parking lot and site improvements at 3733 3 Mile Road, subject to the following conditions and based on the finding of facts below. Conditions of zoning ordinance approval. The property line adjustment between 3769 and 3733 3 Mile Road is fully executed. Number two, the applicant agrees to all conditions of approval as noted in the city engineer's report dated April 13th, 2023. Number three, the applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions of the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of building and stormwater permits. Findings of facts, section 94-283, dimensional requirements. The dimensional arrangement of buildings and structures conforms to the required yards, setback, heights, and other applicable bulk and placement regulations of the ML zoning district. Building arrangement. The bulk, location, and height of proposed buildings and structures, as well as the general character of the development, will minimize any diverse effects to other development in the surrounding area and will not place demands on public services or facilities in excess of capacity. Drainage of surface water. Proper site drainage will be provided so that removal of surface water will not adversely affect regulated natural areas, neighboring properties, or the public storm drainage system. Vehicular access and parking. The provisions for parking and for vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets and ways will not create hazards to safety and will not place demands on public services or facilities more than capacity. Drive, streets, and other elements have been designed to promote safe and efficient traffic operations within the site and shall provide safe and efficient vehicular access to and from the site, considering adjacent streets and curb cuts. Exterior lighting. Exterior lighting will not create undue hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets, nor damage the value or diminish the usability of adjacent properties. Lighting will be adequate for the safety of occupants or users of the site. Landscaping. Plant materials will be used to enhance appearance of the site, to screen unsightly or harsh elements, and to provide visual relief for large monotonous features such as parking lots. Emergency access. All buildings and structures will be arranged to permit sufficient access to emergency vehicles.
Okay, we have a motion.
Support.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Steve, to conditionally approve the project before us. If there's no other comments or questions, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, case number 23-006. This is site plan review for a project at 3101 Fruitridge. And again, we'll turn to Paula Preby, our planning director, to introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. We will quickly just fly up the street a little bit over here. Now, we are looking at a property also along Fruitridge, on this time just north of the highway and on the other side of the road. This will probably look familiar to the Planning Commission, as you approved a building that is currently under construction for this site just a few months ago. The applicants are back proposing to replace some of the excess parking on that site with a second building. So we're looking over here. Let's see. One of these is the site plan. So this is kind of the large view. This big building here, kind of fronting the highway, is already approved. There's drive access, kind of a long driveway through a consumer's energy easement to Fruitridge and this building. The previous plans had this northerly part as kind of additional trailer parking. And again, it's coming back today for a proposed 45,000 square foot building with very similar use to the building that's already been approved. And we can zoom in a little bit here on that northerly building. That's the grading plan. Here we go, the site plan. So instead of a large parking space and just about 30 trailer parking spaces, now there is this building proposed. The drive is the same as it was back to that northerly area. There are some parking, the large building. As you can see, there was a proposed future parking, if needed, could be added based on grade and things of that nature. This project is slightly more complicated than the previous one. There are two buildings on one site, which is not unheard of, but is uncommon here in Walker. It is allowed in the zoning ordinance. There are a few cases of it. It tends to have one set of ownership to make that happen, kind of more of a campus feel, buildings that have the same or similar uses, the same and similar architectural details. Shared ownership is ideal in that case to ensure with all of the details that go across having two buildings on one site. There were a few things that were not fully addressed after the site plan review committee. Most of the comments were there is, again, the 33 overflow truck trailer parking spaces are no longer on the site. It's unclear to staff why those were needed before and not needed now, if there will be a different provision for that overflow parking. And further, if more staff are needed in this northerly building, there are 12 spaces currently provided. It was brought up that people could walk from this other parking on, again, it's one lot, so they're allowed to share parking, walk along kind of the truck drive. It's quite farther than it looks on the map up to this other building, but there's no dedicated pedestrian access. So that is something that the planning commission might want to ask about if there were concerns that could be added as a condition of approval. There was no site lighting details provided for the northerly building. I recommend that that is a condition of approval to ensure that there is adequate lighting for the parking lot around the building that meets the city ordinance. Further, no landscaping details were really provided. There aren't a lot required due to the small size of the parking, the industrial use. And the only thing that is required in the ordinance is a buffer zone along the boundaries of the lot where there is development. And that's, this case, it is the northerly edge of the building here. There are trees there now. If those are being maintained, that would meet the requirements of the ordinance, but we don't know that because no details were provided. So those were some things I would encourage the commission to ask the applicant about or to add as a condition of approval. Again, the use is allowed, the two buildings are allowed. Comments from the city engineer. Plans are not currently sealed by a professional engineer, and he would like to see that for the final set of plans. Fruitridge Avenue will need to be open cut to install the new water service and fire protection lines. We will need the dimensions of the open cut along with the pavement restoration detail. That, as we heard earlier, is something that happens and staff can handle. We recommend that the city of Grand Rapids provide some comments on the service, the utilities running from the road for water, and he says they'll defer to the city of Grand Rapids' comments. It's a long ways back from the road to the building, then up to the second building. There's some elevation change that is a little bit of a concern with the size of the service and the length. And then the truck turning movement, I wanted to show that one here. So to get a truck to the truck dock of the northerly building, it would come in, pull alongside the southerly building, and then back up quite an extensive distance to the second building. And the engineer writes, the planning commission may wish to suggest another option that mitigates the blind part of this turning movement. And so I leave you with those comments from the city engineer. I'm happy to answer any questions or show any other views as may help the commission.
Thank you, Paula. Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, Terry, Chair, a lot of questions that Paula brings up as well. This little situation here with the how the truck would have to back into that narrow lot seems like a bit of a mess. So I'll be interested to hear from the applicant of how that would work and what arrangements can be made.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. That's something that needs to be addressed. And unless there's no other questions at this point, we'll ask the applicant to come forward and give us your name and address and hopefully some perspective on the comments raised by the city engineer.
Sure, thank you. I'm Zach Vogt. I'm with Moore and Bruzink Engineering. To be honest, I'm kind of filling a little bit for Justin Longstreth, who's the engineer of record on this project, but I know a lot about this project, having helped him with the trickiness of it, if you will. So this is the plan you're looking at. We've been studying this a little better, how to make things better. We think the truck turning where we come around the building to line up to back up, there's room to widen that pavement there. To make that turn a little better. There's really no way to bring a truck up towards that building, have them back into that dock, short of a smaller truck, which they would probably do that if they felt they could. But I believe that, well, the applicant's here as well, and I believe they talked to the tenant of the building, and they're fine with backing trucks up there. And again, widening that pavement, where you see that truck turning coming that close to the corner of the building, we can widen that pavement out and get that away from that corner of that building to alleviate that concern.
Can you create a walkway for possible people parking down and then walking past that?
It's a good question. The other thing we've been working on tweaking is getting that access road extended to the corner of the building, the southeast corner of the building. And by doing that, we've actually added some parking spaces up there that we'd like to just review with staff. I think we've added 5 spaces to the building. So you won't have people making that walk regularly. The folks in that building will be there and these folks will be here.
How many people do you anticipate in that new building up north or at the northern part?
I don't know that I can speak to that. And I
Okay.
don't know if the applicant can exactly speak to that either, but it's the same tenant in both buildings. So the first building, once the tenant was secured for that, decided they didn't need all that truck parking. They needed a building. So that's the reason for this. And it is a reduction in impervious area, which is a nice benefit, seeing as how the site is kind of rough with wetlands. It is a smaller footprint than the parking lot would have been. Does that answer the question on access? I mean, if somebody's gonna need to walk from building to building, they're gonna walk down the road. There's really, with the wetlands there, there's no way to squeak a sidewalk in there. And really, there doesn't seem to be any reason to add more pavement to the site to do that, frankly, so. Does that answer that, I hope?
What about the north end of the, leaving the trees there along the railroad tracks? Buffering?
I am not sure what's there for buffering right now, how much is in the railroad right-of-way and how much we have between the building and the right-of-way. I would guess there's not gonna be a lot of buffering between the railroad tracks and the building.
According to the maps, you'll run right up against their trees and hit their lot line, so there's not gonna be a lot that you could do there. So those will remain, according to the maps I'm looking at, Onyx maps in Kent County, those trees will have to remain.
The trees that are not on our property are gonna have
Right,
to remain.
right. So there will be that buffering, and you got the railroad and then the trail, so it's not like a big deal.
But we're gonna be grading up to our property line, we have to. We would've had to do that, I believe, with the parking anyway, so.
What I would say is, I was out there Thursday or Friday when it was actually warm, and
Hear the rain coming?
you got a challenge there. There's a challenge with this property. Okay.
There's no question, and that's why we've been continuing, we developed this plan, we've been,
Yeah, and we
Making
already
it
knew it was
better.
coming. We already knew it was coming.
right.
And it was it's interesting to see. I'll reserve other comments.
I'm just curious, do we know what elevation the railroad sits at? It sits pretty high, doesn't it?
I did not bring that information, I apologize. I'm pulled up Google Earth here to give us a little bit of a different view of the site, if it would be helpful, but there is a grade change, I don't know to what degree.
It's a slight uphill
Right. Where
from
the-
west to east, from 715 to 720 to 730 to 740, but those contours extend into their property already, so it's fairly level, and it's quite a distance to accomplish those 10-foot variances. Of course, a railroad can only go up at a certain angle, so as far as the railroad and them going up to it, I don't see a problem there. That's just by the contours.
Certainly all the grading would be on our property, we're not looking across the property line and take out trees on their property, of course.
Mr. Vogt, when you responded to the Pat's question about the parking for pedestrians walking up to that northern building, it would appear that with what's shown on the plans for additional parking to the east of the building, that if it does reach a point where you've got less parking up there than what you need, rather than having someone walk that long distance, it would be preferable that parking be expanded there so that people would have a shorter walk and not run the risk of having conflicts with that long turning movement for backing up into the truck dock.
For sure, totally agree. So, again, we've tweaked this plan, I'm gonna just tell you that, where we can get that driveway, we've got it up to the corner of the building, and we feel comfortable it can go around that corner rather easily. So if we could just consider that deferred parking, when employees start complaining they don't want to walk up there and there's nowhere to park, then that's when it's going to be needed, I would say. So yes, I mean, that could be considered deferred parking, if there is such a thing.
With regard to the site lighting, Paul has pointed out that there are no detail provided.
No, we're going to provide the same type of detail we did for the first building. We just haven't had a chance to get that done yet, so we'd like to work with staff on that if we could. It'll be, again, it'll match what's going on with the first building.
And for the city engineer's comment about the real long distance
Right.
to back it up.
So when we've got a 2,000+ foot long 1.5 inch hose going all the way to the building, we don't want there to be a trickle coming out at the end, so he makes a very good point. If that 2.5 has to become, or 1.5 inch has to become 2 or 2.5, or hopefully not 4, the project plumber is modeling that now, it's my understanding, to make sure we don't have that trickle at the end of the hose when it's done. So we'll have that modeled, we can share that with Scott for sure.
And I wasn't clear how you're going to resolve that long backing up of the trucks. I think the city engineer had mentioned that there appeared to be some level property to the west where perhaps that might be a place to establish some paving there to allow for that
Yeah.
shorter movement.
Yeah, what he was referring to, Paula, thank you for pointing to that, is that flat area there, where if the truck continues straight there, it's got a lot more room to get lined up, to back up into that a shorter distance. So instead of pulling up alongside the building, he can come around, and we've looked at this already too, knowing this was coming. He can kind of swoop around and get closer, and then back up not so far as what's shown on here by paving a little more of that out there to the west, is what Scott was talking about, and that's what we recognized as well. So we'd like to work through that with Scott. We think we have it figured out. We're pretty sure we do. So
Well, the draft or recommended motion for this approval would reference the city engineer's report, and therefore that would be something that would be expected to be addressed during that building permit process.
for sure. And that's why we're working on it, answering all those questions.
Dan, did he respond to your concerns?
I think as much as you could at this point. It's tricky, obviously, so I don't know, to be honest with you.
So I don't know what the magic number is for backing up, but I think Scott referenced 300 feet. It's probably going to be more like 200 feet. I don't know what the magic number is there, really. So the tenants said they're going to be fine backing trucks up there for what that counts for. I know they're not necessarily tenants forever there, but it says something. I don't drive trucks, they do, so they're comfortable with it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
I guess I just want to make a clarifying comment. So in terms of the buffer standards in the ordinance, on the north end of the lot, it sounds like they're probably gonna have to clear what's there. So what would be the requirement? What would be the obligation on that north end to replace?
When I'm writing these reports, it's my job to pull out all of the things that I see that are concerns or not clearly in alignment with the ordinance. In this case, I don't think it's a major concern. There's a railroad that's not really going anywhere, a trail that's not going anywhere, and additional industrial use. The planning commission can approve it without addressing that. It wasn't listed for me to respond to, so I wanted to make sure it was brought up. If the planning commission is, okay with the rear of that building, there's about a 24-foot setback from the edge of the building to the lot line. And then there is that, I couldn't tell whether the trees were on this property or the adjacent rail line. So I'm not overly concerned. I appreciate the comments and the feedback.
Yeah, my only concern being that and this comes from, dealing on the city commission side and a lot of the conversations that we have, we invest a lot in the trail network here, and the pursuit of the enjoyable aesthetic of what people will enjoy as they're using it, and just making sure that we're not overburdening the area in the proximity to the trail with a major industrial building that people will be looking clear at while they're doing it.
If they are clearing all that way, you could, make a condition of approval that there is some landscaping maintained, whether they plant trees or shrubs or something of that nature, that is within the purview of the commission.
I think for my part, I'd be looking for some type of landscaping treatment on that side of the building, and that's what I'd be looking for. I don't know what
I guess, standing here right now, I don't know what property those trees are on, and it sounds like none of us know what property those trees are on, so I think we probably need to determine that and determine, what type of trees they are, if they're railroad trees or if they're good trees, and what kind of screening we have there now. And the elevations is something else, I don't know, standing here. If that railroad track is up and the bike path is down.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at too.
Yeah.
Is I think there is some elevation change there, but again, it's hard to know without being able to look at it here.
And I don't know, Paul, if our survey plan is in this set that shows maybe some topo out beyond the property line where we can look at those elevations.
I could pull them up from the meeting back in October, November, I believe, if the commission would like.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, if we could pull up Access Kent with property lines, we could see where those trees are, but that's not gonna tell us the quality of those trees and really what they do for screening.
Doesn't really do much beyond the site as well. I don't think these are gonna be helpful.
So, if we had Access Kent with property lines, we could probably see where those property lines fall relative to the tracks. They look like those trees are pretty close to the tracks to me, but, and then we've got trees on the other side between the trail and the railroad tracks, it appears, that also provide screening.
Well, I think that's a point of discussion here, and as one would prepare a motion for action on this request, it could be a case of retaining the existing trees if not possible, and that the trees along the railroad are insufficient buffer, that I think there's bufferscape called out in the ordinance.
Yeah, I think even if we were as inspecific as to say some type of landscape treatment in between the property and the railroad. Yeah.
Is there a landscape buffer requirement between industrial and railroads, or is it mostly just the path that's driving that need for a buffer?
In terms of the logic of it, I think for me, it's the path that I'm concerned about. I think what we're reading is that there's a landscape, or there's a buffer requirement in between this property and the next property is what we're talking about.
Between the industrial property and the railroad, there's okay.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Well, I was gonna make some comments if he's done.
Sure.
We can sit down. I'm not gonna ask you anything. As far as the backing template, my lot at where we are currently in my business has a really tight backing template, and I think most of the truckers would really like this. It's pretty easy to back up straight, and this is not a big deal to me. It's long. The pedestrian thing, my opinion is if they have to have more pedestrian traffic, they could put a walkway across the one end of the swamp there pretty easily without infringing on the wetlands, which would be a lot cheaper than putting a paved walkway all around. As far as the buffer, I would, whoever reads the recommendation would say that there needs to be a buffer there according to what our plan is. Other than that, I think they have to handle the water from the road by themselves. That's up to them and the city of Grand Rapids. We knew this was coming. They're leaving a whole lot of trees behind them to the west and that can't be used, which is great. So that's just my opinion.
Does anyone else have comments?
Any other comments? Okay,
I can make a motion for case 23-006. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the site plan for a new 45,000 square foot industrial building and associated parking lot and site improvements at 3101 Fruitridge Avenue Northwest, subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of fact noted below. A site lighting plan should be added to the plan sheet, which details all wall and pole lighting elements and fixtures for staff review and approval. The plan should show lumens across the site to the lot lines. The applicant agrees to all conditions of approval as noted in city engineer's report dated April 13, 2023. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of building or stormwater permits, and some type of landscaping treatment along the north lot line according to the standard in the ordinance should be applied. And I would say that if there's sufficient tree cover remaining along the railroad after the plan is complete, that can suffice, subject to the review by city staff. Okay, findings of fact per section 94-283, dimensional requirements. The dimensional arrangement of buildings and structures conforms to the required yard setback height and other applicable bulk and placement regulations of the ML zoning district. Building arrangement. The proposed buildings and structures have a compatible relationship to the site, terrain, landscaping, open space, and other buildings and structures existing and proposed. The bulk, location, and height of proposed buildings and structures, as well as the general character of the development, will minimize any adverse effect to other development in the surrounding area and will not place demands on public services or facilities in excess of capacity. Drainage of surface water. Proper site drainage will be provided so that removal of surface waters will not adversely affect regulated natural areas, neighboring properties, or the public storm drainage system. Vehicular access and parking. The provisions for vehicular loading and unloading and parking and for vehicular circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets and ways will not create hazards to safety and will not place demands on public services or facilities more than capacity. Off-street parking and loading areas have been provided as required by this chapter in a manner that will minimize noise, glare, odor, and other effects on uses on the site or on adjacent properties. Emergency access. All buildings and structures will be arranged to permit sufficient access to emergency vehicles.
okay, we have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Steve, supported by Pat, to conditionally approve the project as detailed in the motion. If there's no questions, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is case number 23-007. This is a public hearing review of a proposed rezoning and preliminary site plan, and I turn this over to Planning Director Paula Preby to introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. We're moving to a different part of the city for this one. So here we are in Standale, down Cummings. We're looking at this area here. It's currently a large property with one single-family house, this one here, and got the site plan for you. This is the concept plan. So the proposal will be to split the majority of the parcel, separating it from the existing single-family residential property. That will maintain its current zoning according to the proposal, and this property will be rezoned to RPUD 1, which is the lower density residential planned unit development district. The proposal is for 11 buildings with 2 family units, so it's 22 condos. There are some wetlands on the site. They worked around, there would be a private road with some improvements here along Cummings for when Cummings is widened in the hopefully not too distant future. I can go back to my report. I wanted to call attention to just a few things. So there's 2 motions for you regarding this. There's the rezoning and the site plan, the preliminary area site plan. I will kind of talk about them separately if I can. First, the rezoning request. The site is split zoned. We see this in a few areas across the city. It's not ideal when the zoning doesn't align with the property boundaries, but we have that as the case here. So part of the site, so this kind of blue box is the site in question. You can see the underlying zoning is split. So here, this here is red, that is C2 community commercial. It's really looking at the site oriented toward Wilson to the west. And then the rest of the site over here on the east side, as if it's fronting Cummings, is currently zoned, apologies, SA, which is kind of suburban single family zoning. And so when we're looking at that, and in relation to the city's future land use and community character maps from the master plan, you have an excerpt right here. You can see that the future land use map and community character map designate the site, again, split as the current zoning is, which is not super helpful for our purposes, split to be neighborhood preservation and residential growth. The residential growth, according to the master plan, allows for higher density residential than the requested RPUD 1. So the master plan says that area is residential growth, 8 to 12 units per acre. You can think of that is the same as the West Town development. That is the same district as that. So that higher density is kind of called for in the master plan, but it's split with single family residential kind of neighborhood preservation at that level. The RPUD 1, in my professional opinion, splits the difference. It allows some higher density. The PUD component allows slightly more clustering, maintaining some of the open space, some of the existing natural character, allowing a little more density. It's my opinion that the rezoning is consistent with the master plan. Are there any questions about the existing zoning and the master plan before I move on to some comments about the PASP review?
Any questions?
Okay, wonderful. Then we move on to the review regarding the preliminary area site plan. So this is slightly different from how we've been thinking about the last 2 proposals that came up tonight. Those were standard site plan reviews. The slightly different conditions for a PASP, we're looking at a higher level right now, and if the project moves forward, they will come back for the final area site plan. So we're looking for general character, compliance with the master plan, that's the general development plan, how the PUD will impact surrounding properties, etc. So I'm going to jump back to this plan here. Existing character, so you can, as I said earlier, there's the 1 residential house and currently vacant with some wetlands. And here's the proposal. So the wetlands in the rear, there's stormwater detention, some open space maintained, some buffer between the existing residential house and the proposed new development, and then keeping all of that, the new residential along that new private road that's being proposed. There were only a few comments at the site plan review committee meeting regarding this, and most of them were already addressed. Again, my one comment regarding the PASP from a zoning perspective is that the lot split needs to take place first. to separate them, and that the rezoning is again, that needs to take place before that can move forward. The city engineer's report has very few comments as well. The sidewalk will need to be constructed through the private entry drive. You can see that was brought up at the site plan review committee, and I believe is added sufficiently to the plans in front of us today. And then he mentions the need to take a closer look at the drainage pattern when final area site plan comes back for review. At this high level, and without some more details, it's hard to determine some of where the drainage would happen as you get closer to Cummings, but it's standard for that to happen at the more detailed review with the final area site plan. Happy to answer any questions. I know there's a couple moving pieces here.
Comments, questions? Right. At this point, we'd invite the applicant to come forward.
Good evening. Todd Grassman with Jag Development. We're the owner of the property. And I got Jonathan DePoy with Naderveld with me. He's our engineer for the site. It's pretty, I think Paula did a great job of explaining it. We went with a pre-planning meeting, incorporated the city engineer's request into it, which was the sidewalk on a little possibly future widening of Cummings. We've accommodated that. Scott's concerns about the drainage. Almost the whole site goes to the west. So it all goes downhill towards that drain in the back. But that would be completely addressed in the final site plan review if this would be approved. We're proposing 11 units, or 11 buildings on 22 units. They're a condo. There's a pretty good demand, and there's not a lot of condos in the area. That's been a request we've had. And we sort of looked at this site and said, you've got commercial to the west of us, and you've got the apartments that are north of us with some single family that we're sort of buffering between. I think this is a good mix of trying to buffer those areas, going to a residential use that is under our current zoning. The density would be allowed under the current zoning also. I think we're just trying to clean up that commercial and that single family, or that what was it, SA class. And I think just with the RUP or RPUD makes it a little cleaner to work with the city and to work with staff and say, how do we want this to look when it comes to the final site plan review?
If you could, in terms of the site, it looks like it's fairly wooded right now. If either Mr. Grassman or the gentleman from Naderveld would kind of go through and explain why you laid it out in the way you did, and what type of, after the site grading is done, what will be retained from the vegetation that's there right now.
So the first thing we had is we had Eagle go out there and do a review for us and take a look at it. Well, we had our environmental engineer go out and then work with Eagle on what wetlands were there, and they've identified those, and we've gone ahead, and you can see in one of the plans where the wetlands are, and we've worked around them, with the exception of the entryway, and working with city staff and with the environmental people to align it with Tolman Creek Road. We're going to have to work through those, and that's something that Eagle will allow us to do, because they want it aligned with Tolman Creek, our driveway. We could move it to the south, but then you've got the misalignment of the roads, which is not desirable. Most of the trees there are not real high quality. So you got some pines, you got I think there's one shagbark hickory, there's a few oaks that are there. As you get further back towards the property, the detention comes in, that we want to be able to retain all the water from the site that we can. So most of the trees will be missing. As we look at a landscape plan, that would be addressed in the final site plan approval, that we come to and say, hey, here's a landscape plan, here's our buffering. So from a preliminary standpoint, we really don't have that laid out yet, because if there's any changes we'd have to make, that would be addressed in our final, that we come back before the planning commission to address. Answer your question?
Yeah, I think in terms of, you mentioned about the quality of the trees that are on the property, with the amount of wetlands you have there, that's generally going to be a wet surface for the roots to grow or not. And the area that is, as it slopes to that area, to the northwest portion of the site, that's lower, and that's probably why those trees in that area too, they probably get a lot of moisture there throughout the year. But it does appear that most of the housing units that are proposed are further west into the site, and that there is a sidewalk. So that sidewalk will be along the north side of the entry drive, and it'll go around the circumference of the cul-de-sac, so to speak, and then it'll stop right at that parking area.
Right, it'll be,
freestanding parking.
if you look at, I forget the name of the development, but it's up, the one off of Cummings, the condos that are up there, where you put the sidewalk. I think it was Visser's site, yeah, right there. You see the sidewalk is up against the road. The reason that is, you still get the walkability of it when you're on the private road. You also you're able to snowplow better and to maintain it better. So we worked with that, and that was a suggestion that was made by staff to try to put the sidewalk that was on the private road along that edge. The sidewalk that's alongside Cummings would be set back so that it would meet the city requirements and what the city wants us to lay out there.
Any other comments, questions? Now, this is a public hearing.
Paula, I just think we need to, for the people that are here, define what we're rezoning to, from commercial and SA to RPUD. And right now, they could build 8 to 12 units per acre. What is the RPUD coming out as per acre?
3.1.
Say that again?
3.1 units an acre.
So what you're proposing is less density than what could be put there now?
Correct, we're down zoning the property.
Right. So I just want to make it clear to everybody in the audience, what they're proposing is less density than what they could put in. So there's going to be a lot more area, a lot more green space and everything. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, and we all understood that, so thank you.
Okay. At this point, this has been advertised as a public hearing.
Motion to open a public hearing.
Support.
Okay, motion by Steve, supported by Tyler to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. At this point, if you're here to offer comment on this project, comment or question, please step forward. The mic is on right now, and give us your name and address and share with us your comments.
I condensed it the best I could. Sorry. Steve Tarbunas, 9 Cummings, Southwest. First, I'd like to thank you for allowing me time to provide a voice for myself, my wife, and other neighbors in the area. I'd like to lead with this very simple fact. We are here because JAG is wanting to build condos, and we would like to have a voice in doing what we can to preserve the integrity and hometown feel of our neighborhood. Through this winter, we watched as the 41 Cummings property owners took the time, cost, and effort to do so many improvements to the existing house when the renter moved out. We all got a little excited. We saw a new roof go on, drywallers, painters, and other trades coming and going. Many improvements to what was there. When we saw the flagging tape and brush clearing, we also had hopes that maybe a new home would go up on the north half of the property, keeping with the neighborhood vibe, and that maybe the excessive building in the area was winding down. Needless to say, we were a bit surprised that condos were being requested to go in. The City of Walker Master Plan sets forth local goals, objectives, and policies for community growth and redevelopment over the next 20 years. I'd like to highlight a few points taken directly from the City of Walker Master Plan. Promoting infill development in appropriate places while discouraging it in places where it would harm neighborhood connectivity. Respect existing neighborhoods while seamlessly connecting to them. Think beyond first costs and consider long-term cumulative impacts when making infrastructure and policy decisions. The community character plan, our neighborhood, including the front half in question, falls under NP, neighborhood preservation. This indicates residential areas that are not intended to increase in density or change in character over the life of the plan. It also notes that while significant change is not planned, these neighborhoods can still be upgraded with sidewalks, lighting, crosswalks, other improvements. It's about a 7-acre lot, give or take a little bit. The current house will take off about 2/3 of an acre. The infrastructure will take off, guessing probably another acre. They're not asking for 22 units on 7 acres. They're essentially asking for 22 living units on 5 acres. 50% of that will be called for open space. That's equivalent to under 1/8 of an acre per unit. The average property size of our neighborhood from Lake Michigan Drive to the school is 1.7 acres, with some of them being up to 4.5 acres. We're saying that that is not fitting with the neighborhood. Setbacks, they're asking for the first building near Cummings to have a 30-foot setback. Our average in the neighborhood for the 1 mile from Lake Michigan Drive to the school is 70 feet. That's not fitting with the neighborhood. 22 residences, 2 car garages, that's 44 cars in and out adjacent to Bull Rush neighborhood. If anybody has traveled this area, we all know the increase in traffic over the years. It's often a wait through multiple lights turning on and off of Lake Michigan Drive from Cummings. Many of us have been quite outspoken about the traffic in our neighborhood already, not necessarily the amount of cars, but the lack of respect for speed limits and noise. Keeping in mind there's a school, church, and other businesses on Cummings. All the while, let us not forget to keep our eye on the potential of a future development that most likely will be coming down the road in the area east of Cummings and north of O'Brien. Myself, my wife, and our neighbors aren't kidding ourselves here. We fully understand that something is going to be built there. They do meet the mathematical criteria set forth per the zoning department minimum standard for the condos. Condos cost virtually nothing out of pocket to the city. Minimal infrastructure costs, no road maintenance. That's why cities love condos and site condos. Most of the financial burden falls upon the developer and eventually the condo association. When people aren't getting the outcome they want, it often becomes uncomfortable and sometimes volatile. This is not a good outcome for any party. The best approach is not to come with a problem and handing it off to you guys, telling someone that they have to fix it. We hope we are coming with a solution that results in the developer getting what they are hoping for, as well as the neighbors being satisfied with what we will have to live with from this time moving forward. For the developer, this means approval of a condo unit development that, per zoning criteria, they are entitled to. We also hope that the developer is working to gain a partnership with the neighbors. We are asking to be able to be heard in working through the zoning and planning departments to minimize the effects that this project will have on our neighborhood. So what's reasonable for us? Our first thought is to move the first units back further from Cummings so as to be more in line with the neighborhood surroundings. Again, our average is 70 feet setback. If that's not possible, other options would be either lose the first building containing units 21 and 22 altogether, or we lose unit 22, add unit 21 to 19 and 20, making the first building a triplex. Either of these options would put the visual setback more in line with the neighborhood. This would also give the opportunity to give the entry drive more landscaping, which again in turn would provide the continuity of tree-lined field for the duration of Cummings. 2, we'd like to arrange for more privacy for the neighbors that are directly surrounding the property by doing the following. Ensure larger protected buffer zones of trees to keep around the perimeter, add some mature trees to help mitigate the cutting of existing trees, increase the amount and strategy of the visually blocking evergreens. 3, include in the condo bylaw to include no rentals or subletting. 4, have a maximum amount of vehicles per unit. We are also asking the city of the following. With most Cummings residences having drainage ditches at the road, increased traffic and vehicles, we request to add no parking signs on Cummings for a proper distance from this property to prevent possible bottlenecking of traffic. With the increased traffic, look at reverting the speed limit back to 25, as we have all seen a noticeable increase of speed and overall lack of respect for the current speed limit of 35. Look. Yeah, I got one more paragraph, and that's it. Lastly, we would like to use the apartments at 349 Cummings Northwest as an example. These previously had been attempted to sell as condos. When they did not sell, they were converted to apartments. We would like to ensure that this does not happen here. We would also like to ensure the Goodale umbrella of companies cannot repurchase these units within any of their many owned companies or manipulate the system and turn them into rentals. Unfortunately, they do not seem to have a proven record of maintaining standards to have their rentals in the area stand up to the pride that the homeowners have. Thank you again for allowing us to be heard and both helping us and the neighborhood homeowners to retain the integrity of our neighborhood and working with the developer on a wholehearted, genuine effort on our requested concessions to the condo development. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Bryant, 3928 Tallman Creek. I guess I would like to see this as in a letter form and submitted to the committee so that you have, I think everything everybody went through kind of summed up a lot of the things I had to say, so I'll make this short. I'm looking at the condos. You've got 22 condos. You've got a road that's smaller than a city road. You have no sidewalks all the way around it. The sidewalks that are there are on the road. So if there are going to be any off-street parking, parties, whatever, you're going to be parking on the sidewalk to allow traffic to go through. And if there's only 7 car spaces extra in there, so if that gets filled up and you've got, it's Christmas, and you've got 7 of those condos having a party, are they going to be parking down Tallman Creek to access the new development there? So I think they need some additional parking in their own lot or widen the road to be able to have street parking like we do through Tallman Creek and Bulrush. You know, in the zoning, you know, when you buy a piece of property, you know how it's zoned. You know what you can do with it. You know, does zoning mean something, or can it just be changed just because somebody has a new concept for what they'd like to do with their property? You know, I think it should stay the same. They can develop a little bit more, but like you said, you got to really look at pulling out the wetlands and what's really developable. You know, I say they, you know, showed where they could put in more units than what they're proposing, but that's a little disingenuous. By the time you shrink that property down, you're probably equal to or less than the 22. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Can you hit the button on the microphone? Thank you.
I'd like to echo his sentiment. The first gentleman did such a good job presenting it. I don't think I can add much to this, but I would like to ask, why not an easement to Wilson? Why not go through the apartments? Why does it have to be directly across from Tallman Creek?
Sir, could you please give us your name and address for the minutes?
Okay, there we go. Okay. Chris Midgley, 4061 Tallman Creek Drive, Northwest. I just have an objection to that driveway. Thank you.
Jason Van Ostenbergy, 50 Cummings, right across the street. I guess I'm not very good at reading site plan maps, but the sidewalk was talked about. Is the plan to have sidewalk along Cummings as well? It is. So a few years ago, I guess that's what the answer I was looking for. When the apartments were going in farther down the road and they were going to add another road, it was discussed that Cummings is, I don't remember exactly the words that were used, but sidewalks on one side, no curb, no gutter, and they wanted to keep it that way. I think there's a name for that. And when the apartments went in and that other drive, they started a sidewalk on the other side of Cummings, which goes to nothing. And now we're going to be doing something similar, putting a sidewalk in that goes nowhere. I guess I would be concerned why we're doing that. if a few years ago only they said that we were not going to be putting sidewalk on that side. Thanks.
Yes, Russ Axdorf, 10 Cummings, so I'm across the street and a little bit to the south. My concern is what Paul, I believe, mentioned, I couldn't see her face, but the widening of Cummings Avenue, is that in the plan? Can we talk about that just a second? If that's in the plan, I'm curious why it's in the plan to widen it. We don't need a turning lane, and we certainly don't need increased traffic, speed, because the speed limit right now at 35, nobody goes 35 hardly, except us that live there. So I'm just concerned about the widening and people driving faster. So will they have the police monitor the speeders more? So just keep that in mind, please. Thank you.
Hi, Karen DeWitt Midgley. DeWitt has one T. It doesn't look right, but I just married into it. It really doesn't look right. 4061 Tallman Creek. Now, if you're putting these condos across from Tallman, sometimes we're out on Tallman, it takes a while to turn left, takes a while to turn right. Why put it exactly across? And they put the apartments at the end, and they were supposed to be these nice condos, and they're really ugly. No wonder to me why no one wanted to buy them, because they were ugly looking. So you took the houses out, you put ugly condos. I only moved to Walker 9 years ago from Grand Rapids, and I carefully looked at the schools. I carefully looked at the neighborhood. What are the property values going to be like? What is the neighborhood going to be like? And it's like, I don't want this in my neighborhood. I don't want it right across. You're going to be across from everyone else trying to turn left. If you're in the area at all and you go down Wilson, you go down Cummings, turn right on O'Brien, you wait at the longest light ever. I mean, that light, it's the longest light ever. So it's like you're going to add all these extra people, and then you're going to be trying to turn left, and now you're talking about widening Cummings, and we have a school there, and kids walk up and down Cummings all the time. Some of them walk to school. We had some ladies in our neighborhood that were really up in arms because they didn't want their kids waiting on Cummings just on the corner for a bus. And they had to be really proactive to get the bus to pick up the kids in our neighborhood because they were worried about the traffic and the kids standing on Cummings. So I can't even imagine what it's going to be like with that. But yeah, I'm kind of worried about not just the traffic, but how good it's going to look, the property values. They took down all these nice houses, and we come down, we don't see the nice houses anymore. We see an ugly apartment building that if you want to drive down there sometime, it's really ugly. So those would be my concerns about it.
Okay, there being no other comments, entertain a motion for closing the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, motion by Tyler, supported by Scott to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, Paula, if you could, what is the planned future? I know generally Scott would field that one, but
I
in
wish the
his
city
absence.
engineer was here. He can speak to this with much more authority than I. I will do my best to repeat what I've heard him say. There is a plan in the next 4 to 6 years, is what I believe he's looking down the road based on other projects, to upgrade Cummings from the very rural standard street that it is now to a more full service urban street. It would, it currently has, I don't even know if it has valley gutter right now, and they're gonna, a full, like a proper width curb and gutter, sidewalks on the side, the full street treatment. is coming to Cummings in the near future based on the number of vehicles, the use it gets, wear and tear on the road, etc. That is my best approximation of what I have heard from him. I am not the city engineer. That's what I have.
Yeah, I think it's looking at when you say widen, it would still remain a two-lane roadway. It's just that it would probably remove the ditches along through there and have storm sewer to capture the water, and you'd have sidewalk on both sides so that there's pedestrian movement on both sides.
That's my understanding as well.
Can I make a comment? I think we have to understand what a setback is. Where the road is right now is not the setback. There's a setback where usually the telephone poles are, or the power poles are. And I just went up and down the street and did several measurements. The house, two houses to the north is 37 feet setback. The church is 27 feet. Average. I'm just going down the road. The gentleman talked about, it's my turn. It's my turn. The gentleman talked about his property right across the street. He's at 36 feet setback. So to say this is out of the ordinary is not necessarily true. I'm still confused that you people don't want this, and you would allow, and then we would go back to what the current zoning is, that they could have higher density and infrastructure than is currently what proposed. Is that what you guys want? That's a rhetorical question. If you don't want that, what do you want? This is property rights development. They have the right to develop the property. We all agree on that. This is less density than what they could put there now. I'm a little confused. We all want our green space. I understand that. Everybody wants their green space. When they redevelop Cummings, it'll take away the ditches, it'll put in sidewalks, it'll do all that other stuff, but it'll go right back to the setback, which might be a lot closer to the houses on Cummings than people think. So my opinion is this is a good development for what's here because it's less density, it's less traffic, it's a good setback, and it kind of matches, there's apartments to the north there, so it's not spot zoning. So that's my opinion to the Planning Commission.
I can go. So I'll start with the comment on Cummings. Again, dealing on City Commission, we spent some time reviewing the capital improvement plan. There is some illustrative funds in 2027 for a hypothetical project. There's nothing that is solidified in the works or otherwise assured to occur, but the theory would be that it would be more of a curb and gutter improvement. That would be the concept that's drawn upon there. So that, I think, is what's referenced for that discussion. I do want to thank the residents for coming along and proposing, I think, constructive feedback to the project. I think that is something certainly that I'm grateful for, because we get a lot of unconstructive feedback at these meetings. So thank you for that. To that end, I think that there's a reasonable discussion to be had about reviewing where the setbacks are, how the alignment of the condo project is laid out. I think that may be worth spending some time as we move from PSP to the final area site plan. I think that some of these other things that have been discussed are a little more challenging, getting into the site condo agreement and things like that. I think we get into a more challenging area as the city trying to enforce conditions like that upon a development. So just my layman's knowledge of the Site Condo Act in the state of Michigan, there may be some barriers there for us. I theoretically very much agree that Cummings should be a 25-mile-an-hour road. Unfortunately, the state imposes upon us the speed limits due to law that was passed a little while back that requires us to honor speed studies that are done. So if we were to go in and try to amend the speed limit, all indications are that it would be amended up and we would have no control over it. So for the time being, until we can get some changes to state law, we're kind of pigeonholed at 35, and any changes would likely result in an increase, which is not what we want for that road, because it's not designed for folks to be going any faster. It's not really designed for folks to be going the speed they're going. So I guess putting all of those pieces out there for consideration, I would like some additional review on how it looks, but my general feeling is that the proposal to put condos in this location makes sense. There is existing zoning that we keep talking about the allowance for greater density, but there's part of this lot that's zoned commercial. They could put commercial development on the backside of this lot, and they would be guaranteed access by law to Cummings, right? That could just happen. So I think that our PUD 1 is actually the right zoning for the location. I think it accommodates a better project, gives us more opportunity to have a reasonable discussion about how it goes in, and it aligns with, I think, our goals. But I guess that's my thoughts at this point. I think that what I see here is ready for approval for the preliminary area site plan, and I think that we need to have a thoughtful discussion as we go into the final area site plan. Does that make sense?
So I agree with a lot of what Steve and Tyler said regarding the project. I think overall concept of a development like this is consistent with the area. It's not spot zoning, and to earlier points, it does not use the maximum number of lots that would be allowed in this area. So I think the developer did a good job of keeping that in mind. Regarding the private road lining up with Tallman Creek, whenever possible, I think a lot of planners would like to see roads that meet at another road line up together so that there's not that gridlock there for folks who meet at the and are both trying to turn a certain direction. So I think that that's why they designed it that way. Certainly lots of other things to discuss at a final area site plan, but I think there's enough here for an approval of a preliminary area plan.
Can I just, sorry, follow up, because you brought recollection to me of the alignment issue. I just do want to make note for those who may have considerations about where it should be aligned. The best thing for traffic circulation is going to be having these roads aligned. We had, Tyler, remember Bristol Road on 4 Mile. If you slightly misalign roads, turning will become incredibly difficult.
They call it left turn lock or something like that?
Yeah,
Left wing
because
lock,
nobody can turn past each other.
When you're both trying to turn left, then there's a space, and it really causes some issues.
It was truly horrible, and it resulted in gotta be $1 million improvement just to move a road a matter of feet because it was creating such discomfort and such traffic issues backing up and stacking those roads. So that is just another thing. And again, just one more thought that recrossed my mind. Buffering around the edge of the site to the neighbors and other parts of the development is another thing that, as we're looking at that arrangement of the property, if we can review that going into the final area site plan, I'd like that too.
Dan, did you want to add any comments?
The gentleman here, Tyler, Steve, Scott, have been on this planning commission for a long time. They've addressed the concerns that I would have had, and I'm sure everyone out here still has some after we're going to leave here tonight. I understand that. I don't need to flap my gums and try to add something that's not going to really add a whole lot to it, but I think the lesser of any evil is the zoning to RPUD 1, because, like Tyler mentioned pretty emphatically, this could be a lot worse, and more or less. So I think it's we still need a lot to go over, but I think it's on the right path.
Pat.
Yeah, I'm not going to add too much. Everybody else has said their what I agree with. The only thing is that, on to the developer, one of the points that came up was extra parking inside this condo. There's 7 spaces, and, you know, it's a good point that, I mean, there's room for 4 cars at each place, 2 in the garage and 2 outside in the driveway. It'd be nice to have a little bit more, so maybe when you come with the final area site plan, take a look at maybe adding a few more spots for extra parking, so they're not going out onto Cummings or, you know, down Tallman Creek, things like that. So, I mean, I think that's a good thing. And then again, with final area site plan, you know, the landscaping around to kind of, you know, make it look nice and blend in with everything else, so that's all.
Just to address, this is a preliminary site plan. You guys get another whack at this when it comes to the final area site plan, which is a lot more detailed. And I do appreciate everybody coming out, and we're all concerned about our neighborhoods. I think Steve pointed out something that I missed. Some of this is zoned commercial, and by right, they could build commercial there right now, which would be a disaster, in my opinion. So I appreciate Steve pointing that out.
Again, echo the appreciation for the comments that you've raised. And I think, as I was pointing out, a lot of time when you have a project that is in question, to just say we don't like it is one thing, but another thing is to break it down and look at aspects of it, how it can fit in with a neighborhood comes into play. And in terms of the design, as I look at it, I'm in agreement that direct alignment with Tallman is a more effective way to deal with traffic. You're well acquainted with getting in and out of the roadway as it is right now. And over time, there may be additional traffic along through there because there's other frontage properties that may be proposed for similar development. What we're looking for is to get that best connection and relationships with the other properties. As I look at the plan thus far on the preliminary site plan, they're showing 2 of the 2 units out of the 22 that are relatively close to the street. The rest of them are further west into the property. So I think to some extent, the design that, as I see it right now, they've taken that into account to some extent. You've made a suggestion on how you might be able to gain a greater buffer. That's where this is an opportunity for the applicant to hear that as they go through this part of the review, to take that into account when that final areas plan, if this rezoning were to go forward and this preliminary plan were to be conditionally approved, that would allow for that opportunity in that phase of the review process. The depth of the property, they'd have that opportunity, the way the master plan is laid out, for a greater depth off from Wilson Avenue for commercial use. Now, if they did develop that frontage for commercial use, the way this is set up, there would be no interconnection with that. And normally with commercial property fronting on a street like this, that would fronting on Wilson Avenue, the access would be off from Wilson. Much like this is residential property, that's why the design is for that access to be on Cummings, more of a residential road rather than out onto Wilson Avenue. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the layout of the property, they've got the wetlands on there, and that's where the polka dotted areas represent the wetlands. And if you've been onto that property or familiar with it over the years, you've probably recognized that it is a wet area a good portion of the year. And even where it isn't speckled, those low areas there where those trees are deteriorating right now. So again, with the site design and the residential use for condominium owner occupied units, I feel is a benefit to the community that you're maintaining that ownership. The challenge is, as I think you pointed out in the comments, is that what's the guarantee that that requirement will go forward? And that is a possibility, but as it's forwarded, the master deed is developed for a condominium development. It does set up an opportunity to make it home ownership, and I think there's ways that the developer can structure the deed to address that. That type of structuring is difficult for the city to impose that particular restriction, but that's where it's more in the bailiwick of the developer to devise that to counter that particular concern. Now, what we're looking at this evening are two actions. One is to consider rezoning of the property to change it from the current single-family residential, and I think I'm not sure what the back portion is. Is it zoned commercial right now, Paula?
It is currently.
Okay. So that question would be to take that property that's currently zoned single-family residential and commercial and put it in this RPUD1, and the RPUD1 is a residential classification, and this preliminary plan represents how they propose to develop the property, and it would serve as the basis for any review of a final area site plan thereafter, again, if it goes forward from this. So ours is a recommendation on the rezoning to the city commission. It's not the final say, but it's a recommendation from planning that they would take into account along with the master planning of the property in the area. The preliminary area site plan, again, that's something that would be recommended from the planning commission to the city commission as this would go through the steps in the process. So now I'd like to turn attention to the commissioners. Given the conversation here, I guess first off, what are your feelings with regard to the proposed rezoning?
I think the rezoning's fine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I just think to get that commercial off there is very important. So I would say case number.
If I may interject briefly, there are two small errors that I made in the proposed motion you're going forward, so I just want to correct those before they get read in and moved if you do that. So the meeting date, it is April 19th. I apologize for using a template and missing that one. And from SA Suburban Residential and C2 Community Commercial to RPUD1. That is a typo that I would like corrected. Thank you.
Thanks. Case number 23-007A, rezoning for 41 Cummings Avenue Northwest. Dated April 19th, 2023. I make a motion to forward a recommendation to the City Commission for approval of the request to rezone the 7.69 acre parcel at 41 Cummings Avenue as described as a preliminary site plan dated 3/29/23 and not including the existing residential house from SA Suburban Residential and C2 Commercial to RPUD Low Density Residential Planned Unit Development.
We have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, motion by Tyler, supported by Scott, to forward a recommendation to the City Commission for approval of the proposed rezoning. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, the next item pertains to the preliminary area site plan. We've got a plan before us. We've gotten some comments from the neighbors. And we've got a plan in front of us. What's your, anybody ready to make a motion, or are there additional conversation?
I'm happy to make a motion. I do probably want to add a condition just to ask the applicant to evaluate and consider a couple of changes that we've discussed. Does that make sense to everyone here? Yes. Okay. Well, then if you're ready, Mr. Chair, I can fire away.
Okay.
For case 23-007B, based on application material provided, I make a motion to approve the preliminary area site plan for a new residential development featuring 11 two-family condominium units on a private road with public water and sanitary sewer facilities at 41 Cummings Avenue Northwest, subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of fact noted below. Conditions of zoning ordinance amendment approval. The lot split to exclude the existing single-family house from the new RPUD 1 development is fully executed. The applicant agrees to all conditions of approval as noted in the city engineer's report dated April 13th, 2023. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to issuance of building or stormwater permits. And the applicant shall evaluate and consider increasing buffering and screening for residential neighbors, increasing setback from frontage on Cummings Avenue, and increasing internal parking allotments. Findings, does that seem to cover it for everybody? Those are the things that I'm narrowed in on. Findings of fact per section 94-2133G. The proposed development does conform to the city's master plan. The proposed development does conform to the intent and all regulations and standards of the zoning ordinance as applicable. The proposed development will be adequately served by public facilities and services such as streets, police, fire protection, and water and sanitary sewer services. The common open space, individual properties, and other elements of the PUD are so planned that they will achieve a unified open and recreation area system with open space and all other elements in appropriate locations suitably related to each other, the site, and the surrounding land. The location of proposed uses, layout of the site, and its relation to the street shall be such that traffic to, from, and within the site and assembly of person in connection therein will not be hazardous or inconvenient to the project or the surrounding area. The mix of housing unit types and densities is acceptable in terms of convenience, privacy, compatibility, and similar measures. The Planning Commission did determine that noise, odor, light, and other external effect from any source whatsoever which is connected with the proposed use will not adversely affect adjacent and neighboring land uses. Streets were determined to follow topography, be properly spaced, and be located and aligned in accordance with the intended function of each street, and the property has adequate access to public streets. Major pedestrian circulation is provided for within the site and interconnects all residential areas and community areas, and provides a logical extension of the pedestrian ways from outside the site. And is this Cummings northwest or southwest? Okay.
It's northwest.
Okay.
You do see it marked in some places, like on Google Maps as southwest, but all
Okay.
city records have it as northwest.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, motion by Steve, supported by Tyler, to recommend to the city commission conditional approval of the preliminary area site plan to the Walker City Commission. There's no other questions. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much for coming this evening. The timing of the city commission review, Paula, do you know what that might be at this point in time?
Of the rezoning?
Correct.
I don't know that it will be ready for next week's meeting, so it would probably be the first meeting in May.
Okay, so the neighbors will be,
The rezonings go through 2 hearings at the city commission, so it would be the first and second meetings in May, or when you can anticipate that being on the agenda.
Should be May 8th and 22nd.
and there would be a public hearing notice they would receive as well, correct?
No, the rezoning requires 1 formal public hearing, which takes place at the planning commission.
Okay, all right. All right, so hopefully that gives you a little information as the next steps in the process. Paula?
I have one item for the commission as some follow-up from an earlier project. So you may recall the West Pharma expansion project from February of this year. One of the conditions of that approval was Would it be easier for me to wait or keep going? Okay. I wasn't sure if you could hear too much. One of the conditions of that approval was that they work with the neighbors to the satisfaction of the city engineer on an alternative solution to the truck driveway coming out right next to the other truck driveway. It took a little bit of work. Scott did a lot to connect the two groups. They did sit down and have several discussions that did not go very far. I know that it was tough for Scott to gauge in what degree of good faith some of those efforts happened. But ultimately, they did meet. We did communicate with both sides. There was no likely solution coming forward. So they have met those. We have the revised plans came in on Monday. So that project is moving forward. They got approval for the parking lot portion a few weeks ago. So that's underway, but the rest of it will now begin moving forward as well. But I also have a letter from the neighboring property owner on behalf of the building next door at 2966 Wilson, which was the neighbor they were hoping to work with, stating that they were unable to come to terms for a variety of reasons, and quote, "We are certainly disappointed in the Planning Commission's decision not to request West Pharma to provide an alternative plan. The curb cut will be placed directly next to our property line and our curb cut. They do have a large amount of frontage as well as an existing curb cut that could be utilized. We do believe there will be traffic issues that do not exist today, and unfortunately the problem will lie on our tenants. They will be the ones that suffer from this decision." They asked me to share that with you. They did not participate in any of the site plan review process. They were notified, so I just want to make sure that I communicated clearly with you that they don't like the outcome, but I believe, we put as much forward as we could to resolve that. From a city perspective, we can't force two private entities to come to that agreement, in my opinion. So that project is moving forward. We received one application today for the second May meeting. I don't remember what's on the next meeting. I apologize. I was on vacation for a week, and so I'm still playing catch up, and I will communicate via email when I get back to my desk later this week and let you know what's coming ahead.
Okay. And I think that Scott had planned a couple meetings ago to provide an update on different projects, road projects coming up. And
again, that did not end up on this agenda just because of the number of items that we had, and we knew that one of them was likely to take a while. So the next time there is a lighter agenda, which will happen in May, Scott will present those. It's kind of city projects over the next several years.
yeah, that'd be helpful.
That's all that I have for you.
All right. Any other comments? All right.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion passed.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.